I'm Kelmon J. Likwanan. Today I'm gonna explain to you historical perspective of correction. Significant dates: 30th century or the securing sanctuary. In the 30th century, a criminal could avoid punishment by claiming refuge in a church for a period of 40 days, at the end of which time has compelled to leave the realm by a road or path assigned to him. Throughout this dark age of Roman Catholic Church, the Church can punish anyone. Many victims of trumped-up charges that they were witches or that they are advancing scientific studies. 1576 England. England ordered that each country should construct an institution for the confinement of offender, which is popularly known as the English House of Correction or Bridewell style House of Correction and Workhouses. 16th century. Transportation of criminals in England was authorized. At the end of this century, Russia and other European countries followed this system. This practice was abandoned in 1935. It partially relieved overcrowding of prisons. 18th century or the Age of Enlightenment. In the 18th century, Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, John Locke, René Descartes, and Baruch Spinoza made enormous scientific and intellectual advances. A group of intellectuals and social critics emerged who shared a belief in natural law. As a philosophy, natural law stresses that some rules are fundamental to human nature and discoverable by human reason without knowledge or reference to the artificial law of society. These latter philosophers form a rationalist, humanitarian, and scientific movement known as the Age of Enlightenment. 18th century is a century of change. It is the period of recognizing human dignity. It is the movement of reformation, the period of introduction of certain reforms in correctional field by certain person, gradually changing the old positive philosophy of punishment to a more humane treatment of prisoners with invitational programs. Jails or jails. The description given to pretrial detention facilities operated by an English sheriff in England during the 18th century. Galleys, it is a long, low, narrow single-deck ships propelled by sails usually rowed by criminals, a type of a ship used for transportation of criminals in the 16th century. Hulks or floating hell. These were abandoned warships converted into prison in the 18th and 19th century as means of relieving congestion of prisons. They were called as the floating hells. Different kinds of ordeal. Number 1. Ordeal by hot water, where the accused would reach into a pot boiling of water and retrieve an object. If the accused was innocent, the water would not burn their skin, but if they were guilty, then the burns would reveal their guilt. Number 2. Ordeal by hot iron, where the accused person would carry a burning hot iron so many paces without being burned to prove their innocence. Number 3. Ordeal by cold water, where the accused was dunked into a pool. If they were innocent, they would sink, and if they were guilty, they will float. Order by the sacrament, wherever an accused priest would be required to take the water of communion. If they were guilty, the accused clergy member was expected to choke on the sacrament, and if innocent, they would swallow it without incident. Early codes. Babylonian and Sumerian codes. Code of King Hammurabi. The earliest legal code known in its entirety is the Babylonian Cuneiform Code of Hammurabi of the 18th century BC. discovered in 1901. It is the first formal laws dealing with the imposition of justice. It was preserved on basalt rock columns. It establishes crime and their correction. Punishment was based on core principle of justice known as the physical retaliation or the lex talionis, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Kung Ur-Namu's Code. King Ur-Namu issued a law that favored the imposition of justice instead of naked vengeance. It decreed the imposition of restitution and fines of execution, mutilation, and other savage penalties. It holds the principle that offenders can be punished and at the same time, the victims aid by making the offender reimburse the victim for the value of whatever has been taken or suffered by him. Roman and Greek codes. Justinian Code 529 AD. Emperor Justinian of Rome wrote his Code of Law. This code was a revision of the Tables of Romans. However, the law did not survive due to the fall of the Roman Empire but left a foundation of Western legal codes. The 12 tables represented the earliest codification of Roman law, incorporated into the Justinian Code. Greek Code of Draco. Greece, a harsh code that provides the same punishment for both citizen and the slave as incorporates primitive concept. The Greeks were the first to allow any citizen to prosecute the offender in the name of the injured party. Burgundian Code 500 AD. This code introduced the concept of restitution. This code specified punishment according to the social class of offenders, dividing them into nobles, middle class, and lower class, and specifying the value of the life of each person according to social status. 509 BC. A law was passed prohibiting flogging or execution unless affirmed by the Curiate Assembly. Curiate Assembly was the principal legislative assembly during the era of the Roman Kingdom. While its primary purpose was to elect new kings, it also possessed rudimentary legislative power. The two rival prisons. Number 1. The Auburn Prison System. It is constructed in 1816 as the Auburn Prison. It was the second state prison in New York, after New York City Newgate, 1797 to 1828. The site of the first execution via electrical chair in 1890. Prisoners at the Auburn State Prison worked in complete silence during their confinement and sleep in separate cells at night. It also known as the congregate system or the silent system, because inmates were prohibited from talking or even looking at one another. Number 2, the Pennsylvania Prison System, also known as the solitary system. Prisoners of Eastern State Penitentiary were kept in solitary confinement all day long. The idea behind the latter was that convicts would have time to contemplate the crime they had committed and repent. Modern prison use elements of both models to rehabilitate prisoners. Prisoners are confined in single cells day and night where they live, sleep, eat, and receive religious instruction. Complete silence was also required. Prisoner is also required to read the Bible. That's all. Thank you.